Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of How to Become a Superhero Without Going Through a Terrible Accident or Painful Experiments. Right now I'm working on the exoskeleton again. I'm removing these hydraulic hoses because unlike in the previous videos, I no longer need these levers to control the hydraulics. I'm preparing to add devices called electric solenoids, which will allow the exoskeleton to move automatically, so it will move as I move. I'll explain further after I have all of these hoses removed. So I'll see you in a couple seconds. Alright everyone, I'm back in action. I have the hoses disconnected from the exoskeleton and I have them all coiled up like this. There are 6 of them and I'll be reusing these. I'll cut them into shorter pieces as needed so that all of the components that I'm about to explain will be connected from the back to the cylinders, and it's going to be a much shorter path. So this power unit right here, the entire thing, I will still use it temporarily, but just for the pump and the motor and the reservoir, basically, until I build the permanent one, which will be mounted onto the backpack, onto the back like a backpack. This control valve right here with the levers, I will not be using anymore. This was just for the test phase, just so I can control the hydraulics, and it only has 3 levers, so I can only control 3 cylinders or 1 arm. But now, since I'll be replacing this, and I will be replacing each lever with one of these solenoids. It's an electric solenoid, and what that means is an electric signal or an electric voltage will be sent either to this side or that side. And inside the arms, I'll have switches. So when I move my arm to the left, for example, it'll contact the switch and send an electric voltage to one side of the solenoid, which will be the equivalent of this lever being pushed in one direction. Then when I move my arm back in the opposite direction, it'll touch the switch on the opposite side and send an electric signal, an electric voltage, to the other side of the solenoid, which will be the equivalent of the valve being pulled in the opposite direction. So basically these are electric valves. So when I'm wearing the exoskeleton, I don't have to be pulling levers and stuff like that. I just move naturally, and the electric voltages will be sent to the solenoids, causing the corresponding cylinders to move. So I'll be able to use both arms at the same time. And this system will also be used with the legs. So that means I need 1 solenoid for each cylinder, and each arm has 3 main cylinders. Just referring to the 3 main cylinders, I'm going to have this silver block. It's called a manifold, and I can mount 3 solenoids on it at the same time and then make all the hose connections. So I'll be doing that. This is going to be mounted onto the back of the exoskeleton. So what I should do now is turn the whole thing around, rotate this entire gantry, and I'll show you the back of the exoskeleton and how I'm going to mount all that. Alright everyone, here's the back of the exoskeleton, and if you look here, you'll see some sockets and some pieces of angle, and these are the mounting points for the backpack, which will hold the hydraulic solenoids, electric solenoids, and the manifolds for them. And that backpack is right here. I made it from square tubing and some steel plate, and you can see that there are pins which correspond to these sockets. And it installs by sliding in place. Just like that. And you can see I already have one of the manifolds installed on it. The second one, this is for the left arm, this one is for the right arm. The second one will be installed right here. Now I know this is rather ugly looking, just a big rectangle, but believe it or not, from the front of the exoskeleton, it's not going to be very visible because the shoulders It might not look like it, but the shoulders of the exoskeleton are actually wider than this panel. So I built the exoskeleton to have broad, manly shoulders, similar to my own. But also, from the back, it's going to have so many things on here because it's going to have this manifold, it's going to have a manifold here, there are going to be manifolds for the legs, and there's going to be other components, the motor, the pump, all that kind of stuff, with the hoses coming out. So it's going to be so full of stuff, it won't look like such a big, ugly rectangle when it's done. So now, the hoses, which will connect to all this, here they are here, and there's 12 of them. I cut these from the longer pieces that I was talking about earlier, and these will be attached from the manifold, and they'll extend down to reach the various cylinders as needed. And I made these hoses, I crimped them myself. I have a special machine. And here's one more hose. This is the last hose which needs to be crimped, and I'm going to crimp that on camera so you can watch. And it's a very basic thing. The hose is basically just some hydraulic hose material, and I put these fittings. These are purchased fittings. They come in various sizes and various styles depending on the connections that you're using. And you push them onto the end of the hose, and a special crimping machine will secure them. Okay, here we go with the hydraulic hose crimping machine. Here is the hose, and you can see both ends. This is what they look like before they're crimped. Now to crimp it, I just make sure that the fittings are installed properly according to the instructions, and I slip it into this die, put this die ring on. I'm not giving a detailed explanation of the process because that's not the purpose of this video, but it's just an overview. So now I push this into the machine. This is a hydraulic machine, so it's basically a hydraulic press, and it's going to press down, and this device is going to crimp it into the hose, and you'll see. And there we go. And now this side is crimped, and if you see the comparison, this is crimped here, and this is still uncrimped. So this will not come off. So now, let me crimp the other side. It's the same process. Push it in, activate the machine, and that's it. And now both sides are crimped. And of course, an important step is to measure the diameter of the crimp. It should be within 3/1000ths of an inch within specifications. And it is. Yes, it is. Good. And you have to measure both sides. And we're good. So that's how I crimp the hoses. Now I just want to explain quickly how the hoses connect to the hydraulic cylinders. Here's a cylinder, and these openings are called the ports, and they have threads inside of them, and there are different types of threads. In this case, these are commonly called SAE, or also ORB, which stands for O-ring boss, because the connectors that screw inside of them, such as this, they have, if you can see this black ring, it's an O-ring. Here's a larger version which might be easier to see. But basically what it is, it's one of these, a black rubber ring. And when you screw it in, the O-ring is what creates the seal. It's like a gasket. And on the other end of this, there is a different connector type. This has a 37-degree taper. It's called 37-degree JIC. And the way that connects is that fitting on the hose, this is the male end, this is the female end, and if you can see inside, there is a taper in the opposite direction. This one kind of looks like a funnel. And the two tapers, they fit together and they match and seal each other. And that's what prevents the leaks. And I like this combination of SAE or ORB with JIC because it's easy to connect, easy to disconnect and change if you have to, and it doesn't leak very much. Or it's actually never leaked for me. So here's the ORB, and this one, it's a similar type of connector, has the JIC at the end, but these threads are not the same as these threads. This is ORB, this is NPTF, which is the same type of thread that you'll find at the end of a piece of pipe, at least here in the United States. And there are many different types of threads, some of them that you'll find in Europe, and they're metric, different types. But this is what I like to use. And I'm ready to connect the hoses. So now the first thing that I have to do is put the backpack panel back on. And I have that here. Install it just like that. And as you can see, I now have the two manifolds installed. And it may look a little bit crooked on the screen. I think the camera's just at an angle or something like that. Yeah, but it's good. So, I have the fittings installed. Here's one more of the fitting. And the last one. There are some fittings on the side also, which will connect to the hoses, which lead to the pump, which will be mounted in this area. So now, to install the hoses, and I have all of the hoses labeled, and there's a bunch of them, so I know where each one goes. I'll start with the shoulder. And to make things easier for myself, while I was designing the system, I made this little diagram, which hopefully you can see. It's very rough and sloppy, but it helped me when I was ordering the parts. I was able to make a parts list based on that, so I get all the fittings that I need. So it's going to work something like this. Here will be one shoulder connection from the manifold, and the hose will go to one of the shoulder cylinders like that, and I'll tighten it, and then I'll add the second one here, which will go to the other cylinder. Then I'll repeat the process for all of this: the upper arms, the lower arm, the biceps, the lower arm or upper arm, for moving like this. They'll all be connected, and then I'll connect the hoses for the pump, and I'll add the solenoids. So that's how I'm going to do the plumbing for this, the hydraulic plumbing. And I'm going to get that done off camera, and I'll see you in a few seconds when it's complete. Yeah, hey ladies and gentlemen, we're back, and I have the solenoids attached, the hoses are attached, and I'm going to give you a close-up look of how it all went together. Now here's the backpack, of course, and as you can see, there's a lot of stuff on it, and this is just for the upper body, just for the left arm and the right arm. And I still didn't add the solenoids for the wrist or hands. And then of course there's going to be another one of these solenoid packs for the cylinder for the spine, and for the waist, to turn my waist left and right, and also for the legs. So this thing's going to be packed, and plus there's going to be the battery pack, because the solenoids require a battery, 12 volt DC, like what a car battery puts out. But I'm going to use a smaller battery, and I'll talk about that in part 2 of this adding solenoids video series. And of course the pump and the motor to run the pump will go on there. So this backpack is going to be really packed with stuff. But here you can see the manifold with the solenoids on it. The hoses are attached, and it's on both sides. These solenoids are actually attached in series, and here's where the power unit will attach. The pump power will go in, it'll flow through here, go across here, into that, and then down back to the reservoir. So now, if I turn back to, or if I turn around to the front, as I'm passing by, you can see how the hoses are attached. And for example here, they're attached to the shoulder cylinders. You can see the shoulder cylinders get their hoses. Same with this one. And then if we come down, this hose attaches to the bottom of the cylinder, which raises the arm to lift things overhead. And I know the camera is really close, but my workshop space is very small. I'm not complaining. I'm happy. I'm thankful to have a workshop space. But okay. So here you can see, I'll show you on this side since it's easier to see, the bicep cylinder. And here's where the hose attaches to the bottom. When the oil pumps in this way, it retracts the rod to pull the arm up like this. And here's the one to extend the rod. And this I'm not exactly happy with because it's kind of going to be rubbing. So I might change it to what's called a rigid hydraulic line, which basically looks like steel tubing. It basically is steel tubing. And it could be bent and contoured to fit around components. And then the rubber hose could fit onto that in a safer spot. So I'll try to back up as much as I can to give you a view of how it's coming together. It's really busy looking. I think it is. So that's basically how it's coming along. And in part 2 of this video series, of course, what I'm missing are the switches which will go into the arms to detect my movements. And I'm going to have to design and build those because I haven't been able to find any available for sale which will fit the needs, which are small enough and compact enough. So I'll be doing that, and plus the wiring, because the switch gets wired with electrical wire to each solenoid. So I'll be doing that and adding the little battery pack. But I'll be talking about that in part 2 of this video series. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to come back and keep up with the progress that I'm making. Hope you always find something to look forward to, and I'll see you in the future.